Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it's glad to be back, we'll say, after a few extraordinary years. Setting the scene, we'll say that 2 to 3 years before quotas were abolished, we were actually suggesting to people they should be positioning for expansion, etc. That it was the start of a new era. Today, we're very much saying, we'll say, that era of rampant growth is kind of finished, and strong production growth is finished. I'm not saying all growth, just strong. A different era starting. And what should we do? Because I think that's very important. I think on farms we should focus on low-cost efficiency and also very much support our NUA in terms of really living up to being clean and green. And if we do that, I would suggest there's a very strong future for Irish dairy farming. The challenges facing farmers, you all know them. Brexit impact, we'll say that COVID, supply shocks, the Ukraine, we'll say Russia war, we'll say that we don't know how long it'll go on, and very high inflation, staff shortages. I think that's on farms pretty well around the world. I say I have a knack of actually yeah.
Is that it? Next one?
Yeah. Go back one. Yeah. Okay. The challenges, they're no greater than anything I've seen in 53 years dairy farming. And goals I would suggest that make sense that I'd advise people. Systems, look at your systems, and look at systems in terms of giving strong profitability, a good balance between work and family. We're not just farmers, we are people who farm, and we'll say that I think we probably should redefine ourselves a little bit to ourselves. Environmentally sustainable and excellent animal welfare, which I think is a given anyway. Oh, I'm stuck again. Yeah. Do. You come up and fire away. I say, yeah. To leave me free. Yeah.
Is this suggested goals? You're going to be on
no,
that?
one next one. You stay there, Con. If it's possible to do it, I do it. And if it's impossible to do it, I still seem to do it. Just looking, we'll say that. Just look back a wee bit, and I'm really actually making a point here, we'll say that, we're constantly adapting. And just going back 74, when I first started buying heifers, we'll say that it doesn't seem so long ago. And look at the industry then as compared to now. 79,000 suppliers, 18,000 now, a drop of 77%. A cow per supplier in Ireland from 13 to 90, almost 600% more. Litres per supplier, 32,000 odd, like to 500,000. Almost a 1,600% increase. It really shows, we'll say, that adapting to challenges is something we've constantly been doing. Con? Yeah. The traditional response. Traditional response, we'll say, is more milk to offset prices that inflation adjusted have tended to fall. 1961 to 72, milk production in Ireland almost doubled. Next one, you've gone back one. Yeah. 73 to 83, we'll say that again almost doubled and would have, but for rampant inflation and high interest rates. 83 to 2015, the stagnation of quotas, and 2015 to 2022, milk solids doubled. Now, a little bit of that from 2009 onwards when the quotas were eased a wee bit. Next one, please, Con. With reduced global warming a priority, I'm not arguing with that. Increased production, strongly increased production, is largely history. Either we accept that reality and act accordingly, or expect a severe regulatory response. And I would suggest it's far better off to take action ourselves and almost view this, the next 2 or 3 years, a period of consolidation. rather than get imposed with something that might be exceptionally severe if it's imposed by the EU or by the national government. Next one, please.
That's it there, isn't it?
Yeah, alternative strategies for the future. In terms of positioning any business, you normally look and see, can you be the low-cost supplier, or can you be differentiated, different in some way or another? And I'm probably asking the question, can the Irish dairy industry actually manage to be both A and B, which is a fantastic position to be in. That's Manana land. So in terms of low cost, drivers are low cost. Grazed grass, it's the cheapest feed you can give a cow. It is that simple. Correlation with profits, 60 years of research in New Zealand and Ireland. If anybody wants to disagree with me on this, you're not disagreeing with me, you're disagreeing with 60 years of bloody good research in New Zealand and Ireland. And thankfully we'll say they support each other. In terms of explaining what gives high profitability, Moorpark would say 44% is explained by low cost. New Zealand, slightly more, 55%. Yield per cow will say that. Notice would say it's only 5% in Ireland, 17% in New Zealand. So averaging those two, that low cost is something like 4 to 5 times more important than yield per cow. You might well ask the question, why do we waste time focusing on something that is much less important than low cost? And it is a mystery to me, we'll say. Focus on the key drivers. Now, I've farmed across several continents, and it's remarkable how these figures tend to hold up over time and across different environments. Grass 1, silage 2.5 to 3, meal 4 to 6. But really why I threw that one up is just to highlight that clover plus grass, will say, instead of just thinking of something we're being pushed into, it actually offers opportunity to drive down cost. I think this is costed. It's costed, by the way, by Tagisk. It's clover plus grass at 150 kgs of N. And it comes in at 20% lower than the cost of a traditional grass-based system. So opportunity. Grass-rich as against grass-poor. And if you look, this is a slide from Pat Dillon, slightly amended. Looking from the bottom axis from 100 going down to 0, that is the percentage of the diet that is in dry matter that is directly grazed grass. And obviously, you know the people in Ireland, they're not at 0, 10, 20, and it's pretty impossible to be up at 90 or 100 under an Irish sky. So the sweet spot in Ireland consistently comes in at something like 72, 73, 75, 76, 77 if you're extraordinarily good. And looking at, we'll say that comparing, we'll say that 75%, in terms of grass-rich, 75% of the diet. At the time, we'll say, would have given you costs of around 22 cents per gallon. If you look over on that axis, we'll say to about 40% grazed grass, at the time it would have been about something like 35.6. And a big difference. And I was just making an effort, we'll say that, what would it be at nowadays costs? Probably about 27 or 28 at getting up over 70% grazed grass in the diet. And at the other ones, something like 47, 48. Huge difference. And just think, we'll say that if milk price was to come down 10 or 12 cents, that who would be exposed and who would not be exposed? Obviously the low cost one. And, in terms of going right, it's environmentally awful now. It takes more capital, more complexity, more work, and I'm not expecting in terms of staff shortages that's going to ease at any time in the near future. It's more stress, it's considerably more risk, it's less profit, it's less free time for family and various other things, and it's far less wealth creation. It has nothing to offer And yet, since the dry year of 2018, the Irish industry has been heading rightwards rather than leftwards. It's been heading towards a production-driven orientation rather than a profit orientation going left. I think people should examine what they're doing in that situation and think long and hard, we'll say, because the old sort of idea that more milk represents more profit is baloney. Next one, thanks, Con. Opportunities, now this is just restating the basics. Opportunities to the lowest cost per litre in Europe with favourable Irish climate. Just some of the things to do. Clear focus on profitability, not production. Grow and eat more grass per hectare. Compact calving at the right time. Good genetics, high fertility. Longevity, 5 to 5.5 lactations per something like 4 and a quarter now or thereabouts. 90% of herds calving in 6 weeks. Strong focus on good cost control. Just the basics. I've thrown this one in. Looking at, this is Clonakilty clover experiment under the very good management of Fergal Collin, and same inputs in both situations will say that what the industry generally is doing, Holstein Friesian on grass, gives you 0.81 kgs of milk solids per kg of body weight. In contrast, the crossbreds and grass and clover gave you 1.03 kgs of milk solids on per kg of body weight. Milk solids, you know, that an amazing feed conversion difference, 27% more milk solids per crossbreds, grass and clover. Profit per hectare at high milk prices, 30% higher. Profit per hectare at very low prices, such as 2016, something like just about doubling profit. If you took away the crossbred effect, just from the clover, you would get roughly half of that effect. Why, by the way? If there's a fair bit of clover in the diet, it just passes through the system, it's broken down, it's digested much quicker, 6 to 8 hours, instead of something like 12 hours. So the cow feels hungrier earlier, and the cow eats more. And in Clonakilty, it's about 450 kgs more on grass and clover rather than just grass. Next one, please, Con. Moving on now to Arnua, and in terms of the marketing of Irish dairy products. Arnua, Tony O'Reilly launched Kerrygold brand in 1962. After 56 years, achieved in 2018, achieved 1 billion of branded sales. But extraordinarily, Arnua are predicting 2 billion branded sales in 2025, and they're pretty well on target. An extra 1 billion in 7 years, that is a phenomenal performance. It's not just amount of sales. Generally, that is at very good premium prices. Next one, please. Arnua butter in US, I'm just taking this as a particular example. Penetration of 87% of US retail outlets. Phenomenal. Branded sales at premium prices will say that it is great to actually see Kerrygold selling at something like 60 to 70 to 80% higher than the typical butters in American supermarkets. Just to indicate like that, this is total butter imports to the US, and Down and Brown will say the Irish sales have been about 1/3 of all butter imports to the States are Irish, has been growing strongly, slightly impeded like by a mix of COVID plus tariffs, we'll say, but probably resuming strong growth again. Hell of a performance, we'll say. The second best selling butter brand in the States, only exceeded by Land O'Lakes, which is, I won't even comment on the quality of their stuff. Milk prices presently very good, but commodity milk price is volatile. And I'd probably warn like that I think commodity milk price has just about peaked. Commodity milk price is always volatile, whereas strongly branded sales are much less volatile prices. You will really see the benefits of branded sales rather than commodity, when prices go down. Kerrygold, strongly branded as clean and green. It's essential to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. And I'd suggest every farmer needs to strongly play their part in this effort. co-option farmers should insist on very high standards from all farmers. Peer pressure, a positive peer pressure would be hugely helpful. And I would strongly suggest that every farmer should actually write down 7 or 8 things, we'll say that, in terms of being clean and green, and if you like, aiding the effort against global warming. Write down 7 or 8 things and get started. About the only thing I ever agreed with Chairman Mao was the journey of 10,000 miles starts with a single step. So get started if you're not started. Write down a few things and you will seamlessly adapt to the demands of the future. There is a responsibility in each and every one of us to do that. Now, milk markets, just looking at what's happening at the moment, the old paradigm that worldwide supply and demand tended to grow at slightly over 2% per year. If one went up a little bit more than the other, prices either went up and milk supply responded, or the other way around, that if price went up, price went down, milk supplies declined, so they corrected. That has changed. Now we'll say 2021, supply only grew at 0.8% per annum, and so far for 2022 is actually slightly in decline. Growth in demand, it's down, but it still grew at 1.7% per year. So it actually means there's a shortage of milk product, dairy product, on the market at the moment. So there's a high milk price now for all milk. The future, it's always a mystery, and anybody who predicts the future is an idiot anyway. You're always going to be wrong, but let's have a go. Looking at some of the bigger suppliers, Australia's been in decline for 20 years. Supply in Europe and New Zealand, I would suggest, is not alone peaked. I would say it's actually in decline. Demand worldwide, it's down, but still growing at 1.7% per year. So from the supply side, pretty encouraging with some of those big ones. The USA is always the harder one to actually predict. If we look at, you'd be aware, we'll say, in the last 20 years, there's been a drive down into the desert with huge confinements. Just to take New Mexico, which is very much a desert area, 14% of all those huge confinements packed up last year. Why, by the way? They just literally ran out of water. The aquifer, you ran dry. And there's been a 23-year drought in the southwest of America. You often hear of it, perhaps the effects on Southern California, but it's more than that, it's the whole southwest. More typically looking at 50 to 200 cow herds, we call it, more the family type structure across the states. That is under severe pressure. Milking cows 3 times a day, a family in either a confinement or just where a few acres, 5 or 6 acres, are a lounging area, which is a shithole really. There's incredible time demands and the returns are poor, future generations will opt not to do it. So the number of these farms is declining at something like 8 to 10% per year. So that's in decline. But we'll say we shouldn't overlook the ability of the states. The large confinements are actually, the standard of animal husbandry, largely Mexican labour, is actually very good. Just to instance, a new factory that's going up in West Texas in the Panhandle, still the desert, needs 250,000 cows. And that will be supplied by 10 new farms, again in the Panhandle, we'll say desert still, averaging 25,000 cows each. Cows likely to average something like 26,000 pounds per cow, of milk per cow. That's something like 2.86 million litres, and that's a third of the Irish, the Republic's total milk supply at the moment. Now granted, it is more watery milk, we'll say lower milk solids. Demand risks, and I think these are more threatening than supply risks. China imports 40% of New Zealand's milk. That, by the way, is about the same as all Irish milk. Chinese birth rate is plummeting. And if you take it, we'll say the Chinese government policy for the last 20 years is that all children have should drink a half litre of milk, that's reconstituted milk a day, to offset rickets, a traditional Chinese problem. Less babies means less demand. Chinese milk supply is actually growing. To date this year, it's growing at about 8%. So it's easy to predict that China will be importing less in the future. If that is the case, some of the New Zealand exports will spill over onto other markets. But I want to highlight the penetration of plant-based milks. It's currently low, and I'm not sure the exact figure, but probably less than 4%. But there's a huge financial capital backing research and promotion. I was 2 months ago, I was at the University of Missouri, which is a noted research university for food. And in terms of their research on milk, 50% of it is now devoted to either meats or plant-based meats or milk, and only 50% to animal, traditional milk and meats. Why, by the way? The professors were very clear. It's funding driven. 50% of their funding is coming from the plant-based area. It raises the question, are we putting enough resource into promoting our exceptionally good product? And I would probably suggest no. Very high prices usually lead to substitution of other products at a lower price. Because of the disruption in supply chains and perhaps in particular to highlight the Ukraine, sunflower oil is very often a substitute for dairy products at high prices. Ukraine is the world's leader in production of sunflower oil, not available now, but please be certain the cheaper substitutes will be available again and will be a pull down on terms of milk prices. Irish farmers will benefit in future from continuing success of Kerrygold or Nua. Higher prices than commodity milk, less volatility than commodity milk. So higher prices on average at lower risk. Add that to something that's well within our own control with our climate and the excellent research in Ireland. Focus on being the lowest cost producer, costs of production on farm in the EU, if we target low cost efficiency rather than being production driven. It's a winning formula for the future. It'll be a different era than the last 7 or 8 years of strong growth, but it will be a good future. I want to now highlight something that I think tends to be overlooked. Are we sleepwalking into a crisis? For example, European dependence on Russian oil and gas is crackers. If we look back 10 odd years ago, Germany deciding to phase out nuclear power started prematurely. Strategic madness in terms of energy security. Very easy to say that now. But is Europe repeating this mistake with food security? Just take, for example, the Ukraine war. Will lead to 15 to 20 million tons of grain exports not available. Not actually a huge sum of, huge amount of grain in world terms. Consequences, unless there's enormous effort by the world, you're likely to have considerable famine in East and North Africa. It highlights the narrow margin of safety in food security worldwide. And currently, world grain stocks are low, 784 million tonnes. China, which is a deficit market, holds 58% of that. China has always been conscious of the risk to food security and has imported considerably more in the last few years than they're consuming. So that 58% of world grain stocks, traditionally that is not available to anybody else. So it's only the rest of the grain stocks is available. So I would suggest that available world grain stocks are they're actually dangerously low even at the moment, and a very low level if you have a poor harvest or even 2 or 3 of them. So take another case study, Sri Lanka case study, a very green government. A crazy thing they did, they introduced organic production, compulsory organic production overnight. The result, within 12 months, they swung, we'll say, from food surpluses to a big scarcity. And Sri Lanka is now in crisis, we'll say, that has to import food, extremely expensive food, that many people can hardly afford, and the government will say that is greatly indebted. And ironically, how did farmers in Sri Lanka respond? They are trying to clear ground now that forestry and everything else, if they can grow less food per hectare, they're trying to grow it on a greater number of hectares, so emissions are likely to rise rather than fall. Stupidity of the worst magnitude. Europe introducing severe restrictions on farmers, is it strategic madness? In the context of what I'm going to suggest, might horrify you to know there's now 820 million people hungry. That's 11% of the world's population, official figures. And you're only hungry, by the way, if you have 2 meals a day, you're not hungry. So 1 meal a day. They go to bed every night hungry. It's pretty horrifying. World population growth, I just threw this one in, just to illustrate over the last 120 years, after millions of years of slow growth in population, it has been dramatic, we'll say that, since, basically driven by cheap energy, technology, various other things. It is an extraordinary change. Couple that now with food supply, a global challenge. These are in billions now, billions of people. And I want to highlight 2 points here. One will say that 2022, 7.9 billion people. 2050, predicted 9.2 billion. Now, some of the predictions are 10.2, but whatever it is, increasing demand for food. That's one point, we'll say. And a second point, just in terms of how dramatic the population explosion, just to put it in personal terms. I was born in 1948, 2.5 billion people. In 2022, for every person that was in the world in 1950, there's now more than 3 people. It is fairly dramatic, and that kind of rampant population growth is not sustainable over time. The last 100 years, amazing population growth facilitated by medical advance, cheap food driven by cheap energy. The 21st century, I think, will be typified by a struggle for resources. Obviously energy, we're seeing that at the moment, food and water, I think increasingly so, and minerals, and perhaps particularly some of the rare earth minerals which are necessary, for alternative energies. Some of them are mostly concentrated and not very friendly, environments. Changing demographics, the 2.5 million to 9.2 billion predicted, but the real point is the distribution, the changing distribution of that growth in population. If we just take Europe in 1950, 27%, 2050 predicted to be 7%. So Europe becoming less significant considerably. Africa, 9% in 1950 of, we'll say that a world population of, 2.5 billion. So under the 250 billion then. Sorry, I got that wrong.
2.5.
What?
2.5.
Switch on to 2050, where Africa is predicted, I'm sure it's wrong, but it's predicted to grow to 33%. That of a population of something like 9 billion, 3 billion. So a predicted growth in that 100 years of roughly a multiple of 12 times the population. A population boom to beat all population booms. Just to put that into practice, understandable terms, the average age of European citizens is about 40 odd, like in and around 40 years old. The average age of people in Uganda is 16 and a half. It is incredible what's happening and not fully realised. Growth in population, most will be born in countries already experiencing water shortages. Principally Africa, but also parts of Asia. The aquifers, more than 2 billion people rely on aquifers as their primary water source. And population growth and particular agriculture are putting a severe, unsustainable demands on the world's largest aquifer systems. Water reserves in 21 of the 37 has been depleting for the last 20 years. And you can only deplete for so long before it becomes not available. In particular, this is the most scary slide, we'll say, of anything I'm showing today. Africa hit particularly hard, but world population, in 2017 it was estimated that 700 million people were in areas of water scarcity. Only 8 years later, that has grown to 1.8 billion people. But look at, we'll say, the figure for, for 2030. Only 5 years after that, 4 billion predicted to be in areas of water scarcity. So in a little twinkle historically, 13 years, 2017 to 2030, going from 9% of people living in water scarce areas to 45%. Think of the implications of that for food production and the struggle it will be to feed the world. So global warming must be reversed, but as recognised by the Paris Agreement in a way that doesn't hit food security. If you're lucky enough to live in a water-rich country, as distinct from a water-poor country, hitting food production or the growth of food production in those areas is just adding to food, global emissions. It really doesn't make sense. So risks of foolish policy 5 to 10 years, that if that's over the next 5 to 10 years. Widespread famine, especially in Africa, I would regard it, by the way, as pretty well inevitable, and I'm not normally a pessimist. Leading to instability, leading to wars, leading to huge emigration on a scale we've never seen before. Where would people actually, Africans, go, we'll say, if that kind of situation eventuates? And Europe is the obvious answer. So Europe has a very strong vested interest in ensuring both European and African food security. So the need for good policy is huge. So conclusion, I'm suggesting strong production growth is finished. Notice I'm saying strong production growth. I'm not saying all production growth. There will always be exceptions. We should aim to be the lowest cost producers in Europe, be profit driven rather than production driven. Expect interest rates to rise to 6 to 8% in the next 2 years. So given that people should be making strong profits at the moment, I think it's a very good time to just consolidate a wee bit, look to be more efficient and pay down debt. Support Arnua in terms of being clean and green. They're doing a fantastic job, but they need the support of the industry. Farmers must take action. So I hope we'll say that the message will go out loud and clear. Over the next maybe 12 months, on certain farm markets, prioritise action that will be taken, practical actions to take on farms to offset global warming and act on things. But still, it's a different era going forward than the last number of years of strong growth. But I would still suggest there's an excellent future for the Irish dairy industry. Thanks very much.
Well done.